Live. No.
Live from Zoop. I think we're live.
I think okay. All right. Yeah.
We,
Otherwise, we're auditioning as mimes.
I'm stuck in a glass case of emotion. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. Yes. Enough of that.
Chance, what are we thinking, bud? We go
Is-
now or okay.
Go for it. There we go. I was worried there was
Hey,
a hostage situation.
we got the go ahead. I was expecting some music to kind of lead us in here, but in lieu of that, welcome to the Zoop podcast. We are streaming live on YouTube, on Facebook. This will be posted across social media on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I believe some stuff on TikTok as well. You can find the audio version of this show on iTunes and Spotify. Just search for the Zoop podcast, which you are watching and or listening to right now. Be sure to leave comments. 5-star reviews always help. Join in on the fun on the live stream. Give us some comments, some questions. We'll do our best to get to everyone. And let's welcome today's guest. I know he was Jeff Messer, but
Yes.
it's
Yes.
always Jeffrey Douglas Messer whenever I see you sort of listed out in public. So which one is it, Jeff?
Okay. When I was younger and I was going to be a pretentious writer, I did theater for a while, and I also wrote plays. And I did not have the confidence of, say, the staggering magnetism of Woody Allen, who would write and act and direct his own thing. And so, very pretentiously, at some point when I was like 18 or so, I decided, I'm going to come up with a pen name, and I needed something that sounded really, like, that sounds like someone I know might be famous. And I thought, well, my middle name was Douglas, and I thought Jeff Douglas. It sounds like Michael Douglas, Kirk Douglas, Jeff Douglas. Hey, and so stupidly for a number of years, I just slapped Jeff Douglas on as a writing credit. And, my mother at one point was like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And I was like, well, I don't want people to think I've got a big ego when they see I wrote the script and I'm starring in the show on the stage. And she's like, they know it's you. It's like, you're not fooling anyone. So I dropped it, and then there was a period of time where I did Jeff Douglas Messer, and it was all lowercase, like an E.E. Cummings kind of pretentiousness. All of these are youthful kind of fancies, if you will. My name is Jeffrey. I go by Jeff, and so I've sort of blended it together because 3 names typically get assigned if you do something infamous, like terrorist assassins or comic book writers. So
There you go.
So
Brian K. Vaughan.
There you go, Brian K. Vaughan, William Messner Loebs. The list goes on. J.M. D. Mateus with initials. But anyway,
yeah.
So any of those work as long as people know it's me, and they seem to. So it's all good. But yeah,
I completely understand it, because when I was younger, I had my own desires of being famous and what would people call me, because Plosky is not the most it doesn't just really roll off the tongue. I needed a stage name.
right.
So I was Jordan Howard, like Ron Howard, or Bryce Dallas Howard, also 3 names.
3 names.
Now that I think about it.
Exactly.
So I get that.
Yeah.
And so, Jeff, I mean, we have you here today. Thank you for your time. You're here to promote your new campaign that is live for less than 40 hours already. You can see the link that's scrolling in the crayon at the bottom of the screen. The link is also in the show notes and everywhere else that you're finding this episode. So please visit that link. It's zoop.gg/c/sex spies rock letter N roll vol 3, because this is the 3rd installment in what is planned to be a multi-volume story. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It's I have it planned through 10 volumes of the book, which is an anthology book, but also from the anthologies, things will spin off into their own solo titles, and and hopefully I will have an entire cottage industry controlling 1980s spy caper comic books, where I'll have 10 titles a month, like the X-Men or something. No. I would never want it to go that far. But yeah, the idea is that eventually I will be able to tell other stories and take characters from the anthology and put them off in their own titles, sort of telling stories across 40 years of history between, the 60s to the 2010s, or ever how the math works out on that. Which
Well,
was not
before
the
we
original plan, and I just sort of stumbled into it as I was creating the project.
well before you kind of get into that, tell us what's the high level concept. What if you had to sum up what this is in, 2 sentences or or something like that? How do you describe guys and role?
Um, there was a point when I started writing it when I was a kid in high school in the '80s, and I tried to pick it back up in the '90s to try and write the novel of it. And people would ask me what it was. And circa 1994, the thing I said, and I don't know that this will stick with everybody, but the thing I said was, "Well, it's like Melrose Place meets James Bond."
Hey, I'm old enough to remember Melrose Place. The
There you
reference
go.
still holds.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little kind of soapy, a little kind of, melodramatic and stuff like that. And, with all, good looking characters running around doing spy stuff and, gallivanting all over the world. And, because it's set in the '80s, it's, sex, spies, and rock and roll. See, that's my elevator pitch, is like, it's a Cold War 1980s adventure comic book series called Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll. Boom. That's my elevator pitch.
There you go. And I just saw some of the references to the time period in that last image, a police
Yes.
record. Um, yeah,
And,
Huey
and I
Lewis in the
show,
news.
Yeah, I will show that picture if anybody's like, well, what's it about? Because when the artist came up with that icon, that was the first volume's cover, and I was like, not no, it's not that one. That's the new one. That's the new one.
Well,
But
yeah,
the sexy girl laying on the floor listening to records,
yeah,
that
there we
one.
go.
The artist
Oh,
came up
Prince
with
record.
that. Yeah, there's the Go-Go's,
Oh,
Madonna,
Madonna.
Police,
Yeah.
the Foreigner, Huey Lewis in the News, and my wife was very crafty. She went out and bought most of these on vinyl for Christmas for me. Like, so I
Aw,
was unwrapping it and I was finding all these, '80s vinyl records, which was kind of fun. But that image alone, like it says everything that the title
sure.
promises. And so I use that now as kind of the universal image of, well, here's what this is. And I get a lot of people look at it and go, whoa, tell me more. That looks cool. Or people who saw the image and was like, if you put that on a t-shirt, I would wear it, and
Well,
so I did. Yeah.
look, the image itself is amazing, but who is the artist on that piece? Because they did a great job on the woman, everything else that's a part of that image.
He is an artist from Thailand. His name is Takadon. I'm totally going to screw up his last
Oh
name
no.
because it's so crazy to pronounce. And yeah, hang on, let me get it so I can sound it out. I'm going to sound it out for you. Uh, Takadon Sakul Sataichi.
Excellent work.
And I guarantee I got it wrong. But
But that brings up something else that we discussed once, Jeff. You said that this is truly an international project. I mean, you
it
have
is.
collaborators all over the world doing short stories within, like you said, this anthology series.
Mm.
Can you just rattle off like some of the countries where some of these artists and other contributors are from?
It kind of amazingly, Takadon was the first guy that I found. I liked his art. I sent him some references and the first, pages of the first issue of the comic, and he sent back these visions that were exactly the characters come to life. Like, he immediately got it, and I saw the images. Oh, look at that.
I know
Um,
he won't leave me alone even when we're recording. So hi
he
everybody,
wants
this is Snoopy. Say
Snoopy
hi.
wants on the podcast too. But yeah, it's like Takadon. When he sent me that art, I was like, well, there's no way around it. I have to do this now, because I was still debating as to whether or not those characters and concepts could be updated and modernized and made, to work. Because it was all from a teenage mind in the 1980s, and the characters' names can be a little silly, and some of the concepts are a little silly, but now the '80s are so retro and it's kind of kitschy, and it's like, oh no, this totally works now to do it, with that filter on it.
Wait, so he was the first art. So that was the first piece of art for the entire series. Is
No, no,
that
no.
image?
That
Oh, okay.
was that came along rather quickly, but I had him design the main characters of the story, just do art designs of all of the characters, because I thought I need to see if it works. I need to visually see it, and he knocked it out of the park. He did 6 character designs, all the main heroes plus the main villain, and as soon as I saw them, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. he started working on the script, and I knew quickly that to do a campaign, I needed something, some imagery. And I think the cover image he did was, maybe a month into our collaboration. I kind of hit him up and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for the cover." Once I knew I was going to call it "Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll," I thought, "Oh, this lends itself to some visual cues as you see in the image." And he did that very early on in the process, and I was like, "How can I not keep going with this? This is pure gold that this guy was handing me."
So before we get to Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll, because I know that that wasn't your first crowdfunding campaign, but the question is, was crowdfunding your first work that you've put out into the world? I know you mentioned having a lot of ideas, plays,
Yeah.
novels, screenplays, but was for comics
Um,
specifically, was that your first comic was put out through crowdfunding, or had you had experience before that?
well, real quick, I will, because I dodged your last question.
Uh-oh.
Um, yeah, artists from
Oh, sure.
England, Thailand, Italy, Philippines, Brazil, Egypt, and one or two other places have all kind of come onto the project. And once I started, I realized, oh, international intrigue and spy stuff. The more international people I get to come on board, the better. It adds a certain flavor to it. And they're coming from a culture and a viewpoint which is different than the American viewpoint. So I'm getting kind of a lot of creative things that I don't expect in the art when they send the stuff back
Sure.
to me. So it's always been a pleasant surprise. But as far as the comic stuff goes, oh yeah,
Wait,
go
hold
ahead.
on, Jeff. I'm so sorry now because you made me think of another question.
Oh,
How are you finding all these international artists? Is it Instagram? Is it some other way?
it's a number of different ways. When I started down this path, and this kind of answers both questions. I was thinking about it, and I'd been a playwright. I worked in broadcast radio. I wrote a political satire book about 10 years ago.
Oh, cool.
I kind of dabbled in other things, but I'd always wanted to work in comics and just never had the nerve to kind of follow through with it. I originally, when I was writing this stuff, I was a teenager, and in the late '80s, I would go to Comic Cons. And back in the day, these were tiny ballrooms and hotels with a
Yeah.
bunch of sweaty guys and long boxes and two or three artists. And I would go to Heroes Con in Charlotte, which is now this behemoth convention that's just epic. But in the late '80s, it was pretty small, and regional artists would show up there and have tables. And back in the day, they would sit there and work on their projects for DC and Marvel during the weekends. They were drawing pages, and you could see pages of books that were being done. The NDAs probably prevent that now, but there
I'm
was this.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so there was this young unknown artist, and I had seen a black and white comic that he had drawn, and he had just started working on a book for Comico, an independent company in the late '80s, with Mike Barr writing it. And nobody knew him, and I liked his art, and I chatted him up and hung out with him a little bit at a couple of conventions, a couple of years in a row. And the second year, I brought him the first chapter of my spy novel, which is now in comic book form, because I thought, oh, this is my chance. 19 years old, I'm gonna really take the world by the storm. Me and this guy, we're gonna crack the code. And I gave it to him, and he's like, oh, I'll read it and I'll check it out. Um, I saw him the next year, and he had just gotten hired to become the next artist on Justice League at DC, replacing Kevin Maguire, and his name was Adam Hughes, this unknown nobody. Super nice guy. And in fact, when I
Wow.
when I got this published, I reached out to him online and kind of said, "Oh, hey, I know you're not going to remember this, but this is what I did, and I finally published it." And so, it got a nice sort of like, "Man, way to go!" Congrats and all that stuff. So, so I wanted to back then, but it never happened. And I went on and worked in theater, and I wrote plays, and I had a bunch of plays produced. Uh, co-wrote an adaptation of Robin Hood for the stage, which is this big stunt show, epic kind of thing. And my collaborator and I, yep, I
Okay.
see the two. My collaborator and I, at some point, we did it in the year 2000 is when it started, and we wrote a whole series of scripts and sent it to a lot of theaters, and a lot of theaters were like, "Oh my gosh, we love this, and we know it would be a hit, but it's really expensive, and it's a lot of men, and casting is difficult, blah blah blah." So we always got excuses, and it got produced here and there across the past 20 years, and we kept saying, maybe we should just do a novel, version of it, or maybe we should do a graphic novel version of it. And in 2018, Shakespearean Outdoor Theater did pick it up to do it, and it was the biggest hit in their 50 years of being a theater company. It was
Wow.
they had like 800 people a night sitting outdoors on the hillside watching the show, and it was just psychotic how great the reception to it was. And Robert and I, my co-writer and I, we were like, let's do this. Let's do it as a comic book. And at first we found a young artist locally and did a young Robin Hood, like a kid's comic, a little short, 16 pages, educational kind of slant to it. And we thought, well, we can fundraise off of this. I knew about Kickstarter. I knew about some of these avenues. And so we could fundraise and print this and just sort of test it out, see if we can do this. And we did, and it was a moderate success. And we printed the books, and yeah, there we go. That's the theater poster from
Hey.
2018, painted by my good friend Mike Grell, who agreed to paint that because I mentioned to him, I said, we want to do a thing for local charities. We want to sell art prints for like 20 bucks a piece, 10 bucks a piece, whatever, and raise money for local charities as Robin Hood would want. And Mike drew and painted this. And I was asking him to do me like something really basic. And then he did this this is fully painted. He did this poster, and he sends it to me. And I'm like, it's like, well, what do I owe you? And he goes, nothing, you're doing this for a good cause. And we raised like to 2,500 bucks just selling art prints of that at the theater performances. And
That's
so
fantastic.
it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm tiptoeing toward the edge of the pool of comic books now. I'm friends with Grell, and I co-wrote a book about him that was published in 2018 through Tomorrow's Publishing, and then this silly thing got nominated for an Eisner in the spring of 2019.
Hey, congrats.
And yeah, well, and I'm still in denial over the fact that happened. I was
I,
sitting at home, and somebody sends me a text and goes, "Congratulations on the Eisner." And I sat there for 10 minutes going, what are they talking about? I haven't done anything. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, I did one thing, and I looked it up, and sure enough, I got nominated. And I was like, well, that's why my phone was ringing from the other writer.
Jeff, you need to tell us these things before we launch the campaign, so that way we could
Oh,
always say Eisner nominated Jeff Messer.
I thought you guys knew, but at the same time, I forget. I have imposter syndrome like nobody's business. But I went to the Eisners, and we didn't win, but I was there. And as I was leaving, I had an epiphany of all these signs are kind of pointing me, in the direction of the comic book industry. I would be foolish. I would be betraying the 19-year-old me that was palling around with Adam Hughes if I didn't take this opportunity. And so I really started running with it. We did the Robin Hood graphic novel, which we were half finished with when the pandemic hit. That's when I pulled Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll, which wasn't its name at the time, out of kind of the cobwebs and the dustbins. And I thought, I wonder if I could give this a try. It's like, maybe I'll resurrect this idea that I had when I was younger and give it a try. And, I just kind of plucked
Man.
away at it during the pandemic. And suddenly 2.5, 3 years later, it's we're up to volume 3, and we've got spinoff titles. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. It's just, I can't believe it still.
And sorry to just like kind of put a bow on all of that. And I'm glossing over a lot, but I think you've had what, 6 or 7 successful campaigns so far, raising over, was it $70,000?
But between I've been running and helping Mike Grell do some of his,
Sure.
and that was how I kind of learned on the job. We did one for him in 2019 that was a huge success, and I figured out, okay, I know how to do this now with Kickstarter. And then that's when I did my first one, and then I did another one with him, and then I did the main Robin Hood, and then I did the first Sex, Spies, and Rock. No, I did another one with him, and then Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll. So I was pivoting between one for me, one for him, one for me, one for him. And
Sure.
since we did that first one in 2019, between mine and his projects through Kickstarter, we've raised over $250,000 in funds.
Woo.
Now, admittedly, one of them is a hardcover deluxe edition of Mike Grell's John Sable Freelance with remastered colors, and everything is really nice, really fancy. We just got them printed recently. That raised almost 80 grand by itself. So
Sure.
that tilts the pot in a certain direction because that's a big, big project.
Hey,
But
but
at the same time,
even for someone without Mike Grell's name behind you, one of your top campaigns is what, over 25,000, right? Sex Spies.
26. Yes,
Hey,
the second Sex Spies and Rock and Roll campaign was 26,000 with 800 backers, and it was a total shock to me. I did the first one, and I could tell that it was popular, and I thought, oh, this is going to sustain me, that I can do one of these every 6 months or so, and raise enough money to pay the artist and print the books and ship them, and then do the next one, and you kind of keep rolling along, which was the goal all along. And that second campaign was so overwhelmingly successful compared to what I anticipated, that it allowed me to basically get the third book done, the second and third books done before they were printed, and it allowed me to really get ahead. And we've got the third book up now on Zoop. I have a third of the fourth volume finished, and it's really the most amazing thing is that almost every morning when I get up and check my phone, I have either prelim art, finished art, or color art from someone in my inbox. A page here, a page there. And so every
always
day
a
I'm
good
looking,
feeling.
oh my God, I'm looking at these the artists going, yeah, that was great. Or, hey, no, quick change on this. And so it's almost like this dopamine hit every morning. And it's like any morning I wake up and I don't have something from somebody, I'm like, oh man, my day is going to suck now because I didn't get that page of art or something from someone. So I'm kind of chasing that high now, if you if you will, where I'm like, I just want to keep doing more and more and more, which is why which I've
Yeah,
been working with you guys, is because that's going to help me do more and more and more.
absolutely. Because we're taking that all that heavy lift off your plate. We're going to help with the book's production so that you could focus on creative. One of
Yeah.
the things that we do for people who come to Zoop. And yesterday, so as of right
Yeah.
now, this is day 2. We're 54% funded in under 48 hours. Thank you, Chance, for bringing that up.
There it
Um,
is.
yeah,
Astonishing.
and I know you were telling us this is like your best first day ever. So we're
Yep.
all hoping that this kind of momentum continues throughout the campaign. Um, it's easy enough to back it. There's a ton of fun stuff, and you had touched on it before. Not only is it Sex Spies Rock and Roll Volume 3, we have Volume 2, we have Volume 1. There
Right.
are also some individual spin-off issues,
Yep.
digitally and in print, as part of this campaign as well. I know you were talking about some of the spin-offs. If you want to name some of them, Jeff, and kind of tell people a little bit more about those stories.
Yes. Once the original concept was the character's last name is Spade, which I thought when I was 16, I was like, oh, that's a cool spy name. Oh yeah. Duke Spade. That sounds like an awesome secret agent. And so I kept the names. As I was doing it again, I thought, should I change all these names or should I tweak it? And I thought, no, it's part of that '80s kitschy kind of charm. I'll totally work it, and the artwork helps sell it too, because the artwork is not overly serious, dramatic. There's a little bit of a whimsy to it, and I thought, all right, this totally works. But the Spades characters were the ones I had created initially, and the anthology sort of grew because my son, who was graduating high school, was writing a screenplay, unbeknownst to me, and I asked him if I could read it, and I read it, and I was shocked because it reminded me of the same silly crap I was writing when I was his age,
uh,
which
nice.
was the stuff I had just pulled out of the dustbins to start thinking about doing comics. And I thought, another sign from the cosmos that, hey, wait a minute, I'm on the right track. And so I thought, hey, this is going to be cool. I found an artist. I had an artist do the first scene of his screenplay as a comic book, 12 pages backup. And I at Christmas I printed out the photocopies of it with his script and gave it to him in a binder. And I said, hey, I hired an artist to do it, and I'm going to make it the backup of my comic.
Oh
We're going to
man.
do it together as your Christmas that year, and then your graduation present or whatever. And it was because of that that I decided I needed to name it something else, because it now had have a bigger title than just Spades, as the main characters. And I thought, well, maybe two stories, one title. I need more, and so I dug out another short story I'd written in college. There was this hitman action adventure thing that was like literally like a 3-minute mini movie in my head, and I thought, oh, I could turn that into a spy story. So I did, and I had an artist I wanted to work with out of Mexico drew that for me. And I said, oh, I've got 3 stories. That's about 40 pages. That's going to be cool. And so I launched the campaign with the title Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll, because I thought that's a good catch-all title.
Sure.
It's catchy. It's going to get people's attention. And the stretch goals that I had were, oh, if we hit our funding goal and then we go past it a couple of $1,000s, I'll do another 6-page backup story. And we funded the first week of the campaign, and I set the number way too low in retrospect. We funded the first week, and then the next couple of days we pushed to that stretch goal. I was like, oh, great, I'll do another story. And I had ideas already in my head of what that could possibly be. So I found other artists and I said, hey, could you draw me a story? And I offered to have people back it who could be drawn into the story as characters. And so I had to find ways to fit them into scenes and into the background. And people loved that. People were like, oh, I want to be in your comic book, man. I want to be a spy, or I want to be a Russian killer or whatever. And so it just kind of kept growing from there. And suddenly it was this giant anthology book as opposed to a 40-page comic. And I thought, I guess this changes everything now. So from that point forward, I decided to take the main Spades feature and pull it out and put it in a solo book so I could leave more room for the anthology. And the idea is that the anthology stories could spin off into their own titles at certain points.
And the thing that I grabbed onto, probably inadvertently, is that people were getting drawn into the books. I believe that is one of the rewards that we have for this campaign as well.
It's already gone. I saw it. It's gone.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
Should we put up another? Can we put up another?
That's the thing, is the first one I did, I had 5 in the first campaign, and within the first 48 hours, they were all 5 gone.
Oh,
just
wow.
Like boom, 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 boom. And people were like, oh, this is cool. It's so cool. So I was like, all right. So I added another, be drawn as a spy, part 2, 5 more chances, all 5, boom, 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 gone. And I was like, holy crap, what am I going to do? And that's why I kept adding stories. I was like, I've got to find more room to put people in. And if you've seen the first volume, there's a half prose, half illustrated story that I squeezed a couple of people into, just because the artist that I wanted to work with, she had another gig, and she's like, I can't do 8 or 9 sequential pages for you. And I said, well, how about if you did like 4 or 5 illustrations and I did the rest of the story as a first person prose? And so there were no rules. We were just like, yep. And she said, I could do that. And so I was like, then we'll do that. And
awesome.
my friend Kevin Van Hook, who is the creator of Bloodshot. Yes.
Beat you to it.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of reached out to him. He was watching this unfold, and he's like, man, that looks really cool. And I said, well, do you want to do something for it? And he goes, I don't have time to do something major. And I was like, well, I was thinking of this like 2-page spread that's like a montage of someone who's a real spy, like do a little historical, like real spy biography kind of thing. And so then he did that for me. And Steve Bryant, who does the Athena Voltaire book and has run a lot of successful Kickstarters, he saw it and he was just like, can I do a pinup for you, man? So he did a nice little noir-esque pinup. And so the people that I was kind of working with, they saw how people I knew saw how much fun I was having. And everybody was like, I want to get a little piece of that, because that looks like a lot of fun. And it grew and grew and grew. And it turned into, the first volume is double sized. It's like about 120 pages. The typical volumes are going to be 64 to 80 pages max. But it's kind of nice. And I now have artists who reach out to me. I used to find them in Facebook groups, and I would just watch and see who was posting their art and reach out to artists and say, what's your rate? If I send you a script, would you take a look? And I kind of picked and choose who I wanted to. But now I get, emails and Facebook Messenger messages from artists going, let me send you like a 3-page sample. Tell me a story idea, and I'll send you a 3-page sample to see if you want to let me do a story in your next book. And I'm like,
that's great, man.
Where did this come from? It's just nuts, but it's really cool because it's fun. Because what I'm trying to do is just ridiculous fun. And even, the sex part of it, the true story, my buddy Mike Grell, I gave him copies, and he we were at a convention together last year in Richmond, Virginia, and we had a little bit of downtime, and he goes, what do you want me to draw? And I said, would you do like a pinup for me? Like, like your cover of James Bond that you drew in the 80s? Can you do like a mock pinup of my characters? Is that?" And he sat there for an hour and did this thing for me. And that's the Ramona Fraden one,
Yeah,
which I
if we have that other one that you showed earlier, is that the one?
that is, yeah,
You've had,
that's the one.
oh, so you've
Oh,
had that other, no, no,
the Mike Grell one, yeah, the black and white.
but you've had that Mike Grell one for years now. That wasn't just something
For a
for.
year. No, it was
Oh,
from last year, from a year ago. Like
oh, okay.
I brought him the first book when I published it, and he was looking at it. He was just like, he's like, "This is really amazing." And so he's really been into it. He has been my number one supporter now. Every time I go to cons, he's pimping my Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll book to people at the table. And it's kind of crazy because he's like, "This, what you're doing is just a lot of fun." And one of the things, he took the book home and showed it to his wife, and he tells me this story, and he goes, "I showed it to her, and she goes, 'My goodness, there's a lot of sex in here,' and he's like, 'It's called Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll. What do you expect?'" And I thought, well, that's funny, but at the same time, I'm always kind of cautious because there are people who are like, "Is this pornographic? Is this like, you know what?" The artists are from other countries. Their sensibilities are different than mine. Some of the stuff they sent me shocked me, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to filter it because I don't want it to seem taboo. And in
Sure.
fact, the majority of, I hate that idea. It's like, oh, it's dirty. It's dirty. It's like, no, it's part of people's
No.
lives, and you can have fun with it. But also, a lot of it in the book, as it turns out, is humorous. The sexual situations. There's a story in the second book. The main feature in the second book is it's like a Charlie's Angels episode from like Cinemax or something, like late at night on Cinemax, where the three female agents have to infiltrate a sexual fetish club underground in London to get a Russian scientist fingerprint to get a document, blah blah blah, and everything that they encounter is funny. It's all like all this nudity and stuff, but it's like it's a little pervy, but it's done as a comedy as opposed to being
Which volume?
titillating in the dark. Volume 2.
Which
It's the main
volume
feature in
two?
volume 2.
All right,
Yeah,
everybody. Look, we're
and
coming towards the.
drawn by a female artist. I try
Okay.
to find as many female artists as I can because I'm like, if I'm going to be representing sex, I don't want it to seem like it's a bunch of skeezy dudes who are getting dirty pictures and putting them in books. Plus, I want the stories to kind of carry it. So I come
Good
up
to
with the
know.
story first, and then I try to find a way to give it a certain angle. And like I said, that story, it's not the least bit tittillating. It's kind of funny. It's really humorous, and they end up with a dead body in the alleyway trying to figure out what to do with it. And it's just
Jeff,
it's
spoilers.
okay.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry, but there's more of that to come. But yeah. But it's fun, and the more artists that I encounter and that work with me, they inspire me off of their style and what they contribute to come up with more stories. So I've already come up with another series for this artist that worked on that one with me, just because she was so much fun to work with.
That's awesome. Well, looking for all the next volumes once we have a successful volume 3 funded on Zoop. Come back
Yep.
for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're coming towards the end here. I have some quick rapid fire questions for you before
Yes.
we kind of sign off. What's your desert island run? If you were stuck on a desert island, you only had one book to read, one run to read, what would it be?
Comic books. Yes.
Yes, comic
Um,
books.
it would be, and this is not me just trying to get Mike to like me even more. But it would be his John Sable freelance from First Comics in the early to mid '80s. When I was a kid reading it, it changed my life, and in a lot of ways, it inspires
Oh,
what
wow.
I'm writing today. Because it's real world storytelling, and it's got a lot of heart and emotion to it. And if people haven't checked out John Sable Freelance by Mike Grell, you need to right now, because it's a definitive thing, and I could never get tired of reading it. Ran for 5 years at First Comics in the early '80s.
See, kids, meet your heroes. But number 2, I'm going to have to modify my question now and say, aside from Mike Grell,
Okay.
who is one creator that you would love to work with?
Artists that I would love to work with would be, and I'll give you 2 answers: artist and writer. Artist is
Sure.
Kevin McGuire.
Okay.
If I could have Kevin McGuire draw a story in one of these books, it would be absolutely perfect. And as a writer, Paul Levitz.
Oh, very cool.
I was a big Legion of Superheroes fan as a kid, and between Mike's John Sable run and Paul's run on the Legion of Superheroes, I taught myself how to write comic books. I
That's
learned
amazing.
from those two, and I got to meet Paul at the Eisners in San Diego for the very first time, and it was just this wonderful, epic kind of moment.
Have you met Kevin before?
I have, yes.
Okay.
I met Kevin a couple of years ago and at Heroes Con, and I saw him again in Cleveland at Fan Expo this past May.
Gotcha.
Great
All
guy.
right. And then final question. If you could write, or I guess for you, it would be right. If you could write any existing title that's out there, Batman, Superman, Legion, whatever it is, what would it be?
Not to say that I'm obsessive as a Legion fan, but they've screwed that book up for 35 years now since Crisis on Infinite Earths. About 10 years ago, when I was extremely bored, I came up with 2 years worth of plots on how to fix that and get it back on track. So I've already got, an outline for 2 years of storyline to fix the Legion of Superheroes. If anybody at DC gives a damn, it's there, it's ready to go.
That's
And
the
I
other
know a bunch
piece.
of artists I could probably ask to come over and draw it.
Kevin McGuire. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And look, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show, for your time today. We're going to run a great campaign. Everybody, again, that link is in the show notes. It's going across the bottom of the screen right here, zoop.gg/c/sex spies rock letter N roll vol 3. Go check that out. Jeff, do you have any social media where people can find you? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything like that?
Yes, in fact, Sex Spies and Rock and Roll has a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Plus, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Easy to find. The Robin Hood projects that I do have Facebook and Instagram pages too. I totally, every time I do a project, I create a whole social media presence just for that project. So that's
Gotcha.
that's how you build an audience these days, is through that. So you can find all those things on there. I post previews of the artwork on Instagram and Facebook for all of these projects. So a lot of times people get to see, the process from prelim to pencils to color, the whole thing. So there's a lot of cool stuff over there.
Excellent. Again, Jeff, thank you for your time today. We're going to crush this campaign.
Loving it.
Yeah, guys, thank you for listening, watching the Zoop
and everybody
podcast.
should check out the rest of what you guys are offering at Zoop too, because what you guys are doing is absolutely fantastic. I'm honored to be a part of what you guys are doing.
I can't think of a better way to end this. Thank you so much for that, Jeff. Very much appreciate it. Chance, you could take us out, my friend.